So I have the great pleasure of being together with a huge hero of mine and another hero of mine, Jamie Cromwell. Randy Hayes and Jamie Cromwell are two amazing activists who I'm sure many of you have met and are familiar with. So I just want to turn it over to, first of all, to Randy to introduce himself. And what would you like to say?
I grew up initially in the forests of West Virginia, and when I was 8, we moved to the swamps of Florida, where I lived on a dirt road in a house trailer with no air conditioning and pet alligators. So I guess that sort of led me to a career in the world of nature. But after college, I moved west, and I met David Brower, the great David Brower, who stopped the damming of the Grand Canyon, and many other things. And I was kvetching about, how bad things looked back in the 70s and 80s, and Brower told me a little story. He said, look, if you're marching to the edge of a cliff and falling over the cliff is sheer death, sometimes the solution is not so terribly difficult. Turn around and go a fundamentally different direction. Well, this is how David Brower, who, Hunter and I and others have spent a lot of time with, would lead to what he used to refer to as the great societal U-turn to a better world. He wasn't the only one who talked about this kind of a great U-turn to a better place. Joanna Macy used to talk about it quite a lot, and the physicist Fritjof Capra, and I had the honor to hang out with a lot of wise people like this. So I find myself thinking a lot about, what might help us orchestrate this kind of societal U-turn to a better world. And to me, I just use the shorthand of an ecological civilization as a better world, because ecology is the science of relationships and the interaction of it all, and it really helps us understand the ways of nature, right? And so I think about that, and we heard earlier, I think Maggie Fox brought it up at her panel, where she said these 1,000 points of light, or even billion points of light, that many of us are involved with, and that we know about around the world, don't feel like they're adding up to that kind of societal U-turn. And so what kind of a campaign might do that? And so where my mind has been for the last particularly 4 months is around that, and including subsidies. And you may have noted how many times the subsidies to extractive industries and fossil fuels has come up at this conference, and the figure of $7 trillion every 12 months going to these extractive industries. And a major point about these subsidies is that without these subsidies, most of these extractive industries, whether it's not just fossil fuels, it could be logging, it could be industrial fishing on the oceans, most of them are not profitable without those subsidies. So how could we orchestrate a campaign to stop that? That didn't come up in our kvetching about the subsidies, but I've been thinking about it. And I want you to just imagine for a moment that it's hard to take on the nearly 200 countries, nation states around the world, to get the kind of policy change and effective implementation that we need. So just imagine the G20, the 20 largest economies on planet Earth. If we could get 5 system changes to happen in those 20 economies, starting with, say, subsidy reduction to extractive industries, that might really symbolize that great societal U-turn to an ecological civilization. So a few of us have been thinking this out in greater detail, but the 5 system changes that we're focused on, it starts with extractive industries, getting groups campaigning in all 20 of those economies, right, which includes India and China. It's 2/3 of the world's population, but it's probably over 3/4 of the damage being done and the footprint, the industrial society's footprint on the throat of nature. So if we could get that done, it would set the kind of change that we need. And just to run through those 5 systems, and then I'll get it back to you, but I just wanted to give you a taste of where my mind has been. We've got to get rid of the subsidies to extractive industries, right? And so that means we got to have a campaign on it, and it's got to be a big campaign, and it's got to be well financed, and
Absolutely.
we've got a price tag to it. It's $32 million just for the first 3 years, and that's just the public relations. And that might sound like a lot of money, but we've already got a funder interested in that, so this can be done, right? All right, and so the second one is I break the energy industry down or the energy system into two systems: the energy consumption system and the energy production system. We got to cut, and the G20's got to cut their energy use. We're in an emergency. They got to cut it at least in half. We got to quit manufacturing stupid stuff, right? And it's a lot easier to get to 100% renewable energy if you only have to go half as far. So that covers the first three. And the fourth one is the end of industrial agriculture. You know, we got to quit pissing and moaning about industrial agriculture and just call for the end of it and the shift to ecological farming globally, right? The number one cause of the loss of biological diversity is agriculture, right? And so the last one is nature needs half. The science actually says if you can protect 50% of a large ecological system, you may be able to protect 70 to 90% of the species in that system. So we've got to stop the expansion of humanity into the natural systems. And so nature needs half. So those 5 systems together in the G20 with a highly financed public relations campaign could begin to symbolize, at least in my mind it does, that great societal U-turn to a better world.
Love it.
That's really all I have to say.
No, I'm sure you have a lot more to say. You know, this is called Activism Matters, and everyone in here are activists. But what is an activist, and what does an activist do? Well, one of the things I wanted to ask both Randy and Jamie about was something called the necessity defense. How many people out there know about the necessity defense? Not too many. Well, actually, Tim DeChristopher was the first person to actually try the necessity defense, which actually helped other activists. And what the necessity defense says is basically what you're protesting against is it's more important for you to be protesting what that is than whatever it is that you're getting arrested for. And so Jamie actually went to jail and argued the necessity defense, and I'd love for him to talk about that and what even led him to do that. Jamie?
Hi. We got the idea, the organization that I work with, Protect Orange County, for the necessity defense because they were building a large gas-fired power plant about 10 miles from where I live in a place called Wawayanda. And we tried to think, we had protested, we had marched, we went to the Capitol in New York. We sat in the governor's office. We did everything that one is supposed to do, and it wasn't making a dent because the forces that we were up against had to do with who was going to benefit from the shutting down of the Indian Point nuclear power plant and what was going to replace it. There was a system, there is still a system, a very viable system of bringing energy down from Canada, but we were, you know, a little group of people, we couldn't even energize our small community to see the necessity of protesting and of getting out the word as to the consequences of this power plant, both in the larger scheme of the dissemination of particulate matter into the atmosphere, but also the people living not only 1,000 yards away who had no idea what was being built. So we had an information gap. And I met Tim DeChristopher, I think at the Democratic Convention. Was that Philadelphia? I forget. I go to them, but I can't remember. And I think he told me about it. The woman I work with, Pramila Malik, who ran for New York Senate, is a very expert in all this discussion. I only know that we proffered the necessity defense to the judge that we were before. Our our charge was blocking traffic, which we were not blocking traffic, as a matter of fact, but they needed a charge to take us away. And then we said, our lawyer, wonderful lawyer, proffered the necessity defense, and the judge, of course, it was up to his discretion, and he would have nothing to do with it. That is the luck of the draw. Tim drew a judge who managed to listen to the argument, because I think the argument is compelling, that the damage done to the environment, to the locality, to the greater area is so much more profound and dangerous and inevitable than what the small gesture that we made in shutting down this power plant, which only lasted, I think, for a couple of hours before we chained ourselves with bicycle locks by our necks. I have not heard of anybody using the necessity defense, and certainly not being successful. If they'd been successful, I think more people would have used it. But I'm not privy to all the cases that are going on all over the country and all over the world. Well, of course, they have their own court system. So I would say that I think the tools are there. It's whether the commitment to using those tools effectively and in finding a way to interface and engage with the other side and figure out what pressure can be brought to bear on these multi-billion-dollar corporations, who are financed by New York banks, and government agencies are in their pockets. Governors have, Cuomo obviously had his own issues. What he wanted and what happened at Indian Point was a catastrophe. So I feel I wish I was more competent and more well-read and knowledgeable about this issue. I hear people talking, in the two people that I have heard, who know a great deal more about this than I do. My wonder is, the solutions seem fairly straightforward and understandable and compelling, but not to the powers that be, not to the banks, not to rapacious corporate capitalism that seems to be out of its mind, if it has a mind. And I'm confused. I'm doubtful that we can make an impact on those people whose seeming interest is they have no comprehension of what they must know what's coming, but it doesn't seem to deter them in any way. And then we're all of us running around yelling our heads off. This is the truth. The sky is falling. The sky is falling. And that's what they say. The sky is not falling. It's going to be fine. We're going to figure this out. Something's going to happen. It's going to be in carbon sequestration. It's going to be in fusion. It's going to be in any number of things. The man in Ghana who is using Tesla's principle, the vibration of Earth, producing unlimited energy in perpetuity. I hear all those things and I see the documentary, and then I see that nothing happens, nothing changes. And we sort of sit on the shore while the waves roll in closer and closer, and you can see the detritus of all the damage done somewhere else. And obviously it's coming. A storm will come. The wave will break. It will break on us. And I think we're totally and completely, for the most part, unprepared or unwilling to do the kind of confrontation, I see it in indigenous people and the wonderful women, the water protectors. I see their passion. I see their commitment to do anything necessary. I'm not sure whether it resonates with the powers that be, but it has to. We have to. You know, the indigenous people say that the problem with us moderns is that we have lost touch with the spirit, and that the only way to move is to have a paradigm shift, and that paradigm shift occurs spontaneously as a consequence of intentionality, and it happens in the heart. It happens in each and every person, and if that happens, then there will be a paradigm shift. But it seems that it's not within our control. It's something that we haven't earned yet. The world, as far as I can see, in Africa and South America, on the United States border, in what is now happening in Israel, around the periphery, the forest has been lit, and it is now burning towards us. But it doesn't seem to deter anyone. They don't seem to have any sense of humility in the face of the consequences of their actions and what that will mean to the peoples of the world and their ability to live. And we will have a spate of bad weather in the Midwest at some point, in which 1 million people will die in a day. I wonder then if that's what it takes, if it takes the sacrifice of innocent, always innocent, mostly innocent people, no, always innocent people, in order to get the attention of the powers that be, because I don't see the interface between all these wonderful, knowledgeable people about the issue and those people that are fostering the extraction industry and these failed technologies that they know are unworkable. So I'm in a predicament of knowing very little, which is a very dangerous thing.
So, Jamie, what can activists do then? What must we do at this point? If somebody wants to get the attention in this way, the reason why I brought up the necessity defense was because I think that that's a possibility. Because the fact that it was even heard in your case means that...
No, it was not heard. Not in my case.
It wasn't heard? Okay, well, it was heard.
He would not allow the discussion.
Okay, but...
His attitude, the judge's attitude, was fairly simple and straightforward. It did not represent a threat to humanity or the community because it was not built yet and it was not operating. Therefore, you could not point to the damage being done to either the people or the environment because it was in construction. Of course, once construction was completed and it was operating, it operates now illegally because it does not have water and air permit. I think it's a water permit that they're missing. And it doesn't seem to matter to the state whatsoever. Finally, a delegation is coming from the New York Senate to try to look into the corruption that went into the shutting down of Indian Point, the nuclear power plant. But whether that is just now a gesture on the part of one senator to get a little attention, to have an issue to run on the next time so that he can move up to wherever his ambition leads him, the amount of self-interest, the amount of hubris, the amount of dilettante, no, that's not the right word. It's extraordinary to me that I listen to these people speak, and I'm captivated by their knowledge and by their imagination. And then I am also impressed by the people who sacrificed, the young man who sacrificed his life at Cop City. It doesn't sound like it is an environmental issue. Everything, all these things are interconnected. So I don't know how to answer your question. If you get a good judge, I recommend anybody who makes one of these actions informs himself on what are the requirements of the necessity defense and make an appeal to the judge to listen to this defense, which I think, if done properly, is compelling. The question is, we have a lot of judges all over this country that were put in under the Trump administration, and actually it really doesn't matter because Obama did the same thing. So it doesn't really matter. Sometimes you get a Republican judge who listens and who makes wonderful judgments because he happens to care about something other than the Republican Party. He happens to care about the planet. But then there are a lot of liberal judges who you think would be on the right side and are not on the right side because they don't really care and they just want to get it. When we went for our appeal and we offered the information that Cuomo's right-hand man had been convicted of graft, and that graft had gone directly into the making of this plant, and that was against New York law, and it should be shut down immediately. They actually laughed in our faces. This 3-judge panel, like so new. So I don't know. It's a real, the activists who, I did a little of it, Extinction Rebellion, gluing their hands to the bank. When we have a march where there are 1 million people, when we have demonstrations where people won't go away and will resist and lock themselves in and continue to do it, it has to be continual. It has to be ongoing. It has to be it has to grow in intensity. There has to be a risk. There's always a risk. If there's not a risk, it doesn't impress anyone, and it doesn't work.
Randy, what do you think about this dilemma about activism? Because there's so many reasons for us to protest. I mean, so many of us have gotten arrested or, stood in front of, Paul Watson, who's a huge inspiration to all of us. He actually stood in front of a ship, right? He stood in front of a ship and put his life on the line. So what more can we do? I just don't know what we can do as a collective to make our voices heard louder than they are. I mean, other than what we're all doing, but what else can we do you think?
Yeah, Paul Watson is, I think, one of the most courageous people I've certainly ever met, and I've met a few courageous characters around the planet. But he did another action once where he didn't just put his body in between, harm's way, but the pirate ship was at port, so he just snuck on board at night. Ships have a plug, literally, in the bottom of the engine room. He just went in there when everybody was off board, pulled the plug, went outside the engine room, padlocked the engine door, locked, and then left the boat. It sank in harbor. Right?
That's
and so,
amazing.
But we have decades of these one-off actions, and when I look at my career at Rainforest Action Network, and we had more successes than many in the sense of, say, stopping Burger King from buying rainforest beef or stopping Home Depot from buying mahogany doors from the Amazon from indigenous reserves, or getting Citibank to stop funding illegal logging, or getting the World Bank to stop funding hydroelectric dams in the Amazon. These were all victories, but to me, in retrospect, it's heroic but insufficient. It didn't change, it didn't do the paradigm shift, that Jamie referred to. And so what might do that? So that's why I'm talking about how do we have a kind of a larger collective activism. And the idea I threw out on the table about these 5 system changes in the G20 with particularly a 3-year intensive where we berate them constantly, full-page ads, month after month after month in the Financial Times and the International Herald Tribune and all of that, at all these global gatherings, whether it's the G6 meeting or the G20 meeting or the G77 meeting or the World Economic Forum meeting or the World Bank IMF annual meeting or the Global Environment Facility meeting, or all of them. There's so many of these damn, global gatherings, the climate, or the COPs, the climate COP, the biodiversity COP, all of those, but we would have the budget to hit them with the same message that if you aren't making at least these 5 system changes in the 20 largest economies, you're just pissing in the wind. And at a certain point, that kind of organized pressure can matter, can make the difference. That's how we won these smaller campaigns along the way. And I'm just saying, we've got to step up the scale, and we've got to do it really quickly.
Absolutely. And I just want to re-emphasize what Paul said, which is he said what Russell Means said, which is be present, right? So this is sort of a in a way, it's a revolution inside all of us, inside our hearts. So that's a form of activism for all of us, for each person to actually have that revolution of connecting with our hearts in a different way than we've been used to, and activism in the present, right? So you're present. When you're present, you're actually acting. So that's really important for this paradigm shift, don't you think, to happen? That if everybody actually became present, and if we were all actually present in each moment, it's very challenging, I think, for all of us because we're so connected to these things, right? Well, I mean, we're addicted to technology. So, you know, this is Indigenous Day, and of course, I've been so moved the whole weekend. It's been really hard for me and challenging for me to do my work because I've been so incredibly moved by what Shie said, by what everybody said, honestly. It's just been an incredible group of people. But the thing about it is that, for example, Shie brought up the whales and Paul talks about the whales and how if you look into the eye of a whale, you're changed, right? What if we were all changed today, as Sheila mentioned, right? And Onmatakwiasan, by the way, all my relations, we are connected to everyone. We're all connected to each other. And the only way that we can actually make something happen outside there is to take this connection that we have with our hearts that so many people have talked about today and over the weekend, and move that out there and inspire other people, right? I think that's a form of activism, is inspiration.
No, and I thought some years ago that the extreme weather events in the sense of Hurricane Sandy or Katrina would create the political will for the level of change that we need, but it didn't happen. However, you know, this step up this last year, I think, is bringing literally hundreds of millions of people into that sense of presence from the very solar plexus that this is a survival situation. And they may be thinking of their own personal survival, but most people are thinking of at least, you know, family and community survival. But for all of us here, we're thinking of the entire web of life survival, right? Because that's what really counts, you know. And so I think there is a window of opportunity around this sense of presence with the task at hand that is beginning to open up. I thought it would open up about 3 to 5 years ago, but it didn't. But it's opening up now.
Jamie, would you just like to add just some final words because we're running out of time here?
Yeah, I'm interested in the work that Graham Hancock did on the Younger Dryas and the fact that sort of a precursor of well, it wasn't a precursor, it was an event in and of itself. But if you compare where we are now to what happened when this comet hit the Earth, broke up and hit the Earth all over the Earth, causing nuclear winter, the rise, 400-foot rise in sea level, the extinction of almost everybody, but not everybody. And it seems to me that maybe our inability to do what's necessary, which I always equate to that monk in Vietnam who set himself on fire. And there was another man in Romania who set himself on fire. And what Watson did and other people have done that I'm not aware of, making the final sacrifice, that giving your life, because in order to change people's minds, they have to realize that there is consequence to everything that they do and everything that they buy and everything that they ignore and everything that they discard and everything that they silence. There's a consequence, and that may be that it has shut down our ability, that our society, our culture has reached the dead end that was there from the beginning, that it's gone, the experiment has gone as far as it can go. And it will go on after us, but there will be not just a paradigm shift, there will be a planetary shift, and it will be very hard times. And out of that will grow another civilization over the millennia that will also have its flaw, but maybe then they will learn to deal with the flaws instead of sweeping it under the rug, which is what is being done now almost every place that I look.
Well, I want to thank everybody and for your attention and for these two wonderful elders and wise people who are amazing people in their own right. And I just wanted to leave you with one thing. John Perkins, who couldn't be here but wanted to be here, wrote a book called The World is As You Dream It. And I just wanted to leave everybody with that, because the world is as we dream it together, and we can actually act together as activists. Some of us are accidental activists, but I think that's a good dream. So, thanks.